Mr. President, this week, as this is no news flash here, a major storm, winter storm, brought snow, sleet, frozen rain, and bitter cold temperatures to most of the middle and eastern parts of the country. I rise today to really highlight the dispatchable baseload power, coal, natural gas, and nuclear, what the role that those items played in keeping the 200 million Americans impacted by this winter storm safe and warm. Common sense tells us that in the peak heat of summer or the depths of a winter cold, we're going to consume more electricity. Americans expect, and very reasonably, that our country's energy policies will result in affordable and reliable electricity so that they can keep their homes cool in the summer and warm in the winter. If we know that demand for electricity is at its peak during times of extreme heat or extreme cold, such as we're experiencing, I think it was 6 degrees this morning, then it would make sense that our energy policy would prioritize those generation sources that are available to meet the demand when electricity is needed the most. So which sources of energy showed up this week? Not surprisingly, fossil fuels and nuclear power provided the bulk of electricity during this week's storm and the intense cold that has followed. PJM interconnection is the electric grid operator in all or parts of 13 states, including my state of West Virginia, that were impacted by this winter storm. In a filing with the Department of Energy, PJM projected that its highest ever winter peak electricity demand would take place on Tuesday morning of this week. At 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning, fossil energy sources, including coal, natural gas, and oil, provided 2/3 of PJM's power, and another 23.6% of that was nuclear power. So that means that at a time of record winter electricity demand, 90% of the load was shouldered by baseload energy sources. And electricity is just part of the story, because natural gas is also used for residential heating in many of the same areas, providing energy beyond what is reflected in energy generation sources. This chart here really shows, it's from the Energy Policy Resource Foundation, and it shows the PJM electricity generation by source for the past week. It illustrates just what I've said, that fossil fuels and nuclear carried the load across PJM throughout this week's winter storm and its aftermath. The solid blue here represents nuclear. It stayed solid like you would a baseload energy resource. Similarly, the red shows the reliable supply of electricity from our coal plants. You see it fluctuates a little bit, but it's still very steady and very meaningful. And the green shows electricity produced from natural gas, the largest single source in the PJM region. Here's the green. At the very top, what you see here is you see the relatively small amount of electricity produced from wind, solar, and hydroelectric sources. What is notable is not just that the renewable sources generate smaller amounts of electricity, but see how sporadic they are. This is through a whole week here of the last storm that we just had. So you can see from the chart that solar energy, which is yellow, basically disappears at night, of course. And then on Saturday, we had all that cloud cover, and again, or Sunday, cloud cover too from the snow, no generation. Wind power produced more on Friday. Wind is the blue on Friday, but then it basically disappears on Saturday because the wind wasn't blowing. So I highlight this chart not because I want to pick winners and losers on our energy resources. To the contrary, I believe all types of energy, all of this, including renewables, should be part of our energy mixture. But our country must have enough dispatchable baseload energy, that's from green on down, the type of reliable power that fossil fuels and nuclear provided, if we're going to stay warm in a situation such as this or in the depths of the winter. The Biden administration, like the Obama administration before this, did everything possible to shut down our coal fleets. The Biden EPA had an entire strategy for pursuing multiple regulations, and I'll just name a few of them: Clean Power Plan 2.0, ELG rules for power plants, coal ash regulations, unachievable particulate matter rules, ozone rules, and the MATS rule, all to make it impossible to keep a coal plant open. As the Wall Street Journal editorialized on Monday, coal is an especially valuable part of our grid during periods of peak winter demand because months of fuel can be stockpiled on site at a plant. We see this all over West Virginia because we have not just the resource but the power generation from it, and it can be used to supply more electricity when natural gas is also needed for residential heating. On the oil and gas side, the Biden administration imposed a natural gas tax designed to make energy more expensive for consumers. The administration canceled the Keystone XL pipeline and, working with their allies and state governments, stood in the way of pipelines that could move abundant natural gas produced in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio to gas-starved areas in our Northeast and in our Southeast. I was very proud of the bipartisan work that we did in passing the ADVANCE Act to make nuclear licensing more efficient. But even that overwhelmingly bipartisan bill took years longer to pass because of a handful of Democrat opponents. So I'm glad that we had sufficient dispatchable power to make it through the winter storm this week, but I'm not convinced we would have if we had continued the Biden administration radical opposition to the energy sources that people rely on to keep them warm in the winter and cool in the summer. I appreciate President Trump and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, Energy Secretary Chris Wright, and others across the administration for their common sense approach to regulation that allows us to keep producing and utilizing the energy resources that we need, especially during periods of peak demand. So going forward, I will continue working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to lock in common sense permitting reform so that projects of all types, including sources of dispatchable baseload electricity, can be permitted through a fair and efficient process. So I'm going to switch gears here to another hat that I wear, and I want to talk about another topic, and that is the progress that we've made in restoring a functioning appropriations process and the critical importance of the work before us. But first, I would like to thank our appropriations leaders, Chair Collins and Vice Chair Murray, as well as Leader Thune. I applaud them for their steadfast commitment to return to regular order, and I'm glad to see that our work has brought these bills to the Senate floor. In particular, I'm proud of the work that we accomplished in a bipartisan fashion in my Labor, Health, and Human Services Education and Related Agencies bill. It's a big bill. I'd like to thank all of my fellow committee members for their input. We received 12,000 total member requests for this bill. As Senator Baldwin and I began our fourth year this year of working on this subcommittee together, I'm pleased that we were once again able to bring forward a bipartisan bill that reflects the targeted investments, disciplined decision-making, and a shared commitment to meeting the needs of the American people. The Labor H bill allocates limited taxpayer resources to key bipartisan priorities, and it does so at a lower level than we did in fiscal year 2025. In fact, it decreases the base discretionary cost of the bill by $3.2 billion compared to fiscal year 2025. To achieve this, the bill reduces or eliminates funding from more than 40 programs and activities and realigns spending to reflect Republican values and priorities while continuing to deliver on areas where agreements exist across the aisle. The bill includes a number of member priorities, such as greater investments in America's biomedical research, child care, mental and rural health, workforce development, and continued efforts to combat the opioid epidemic. As we work to right-size the federal government, the bill also includes targeted decreases in administrative funding, while ensuring that our agencies have appropriate staffing levels to carry out their statutory responsibilities. We also preserve long-standing, consensus-driven policy provisions and reject the inclusion of any new controversial riders. That stability is really important, and not only for our agencies, but for our families, our workers, and communities counting on the programs that we authorize. A major priority in this bill is our sustained commitment to the National Institutes of Health. We provide funding for NIH to support life-saving biomedical research, which touches us all, and research that makes Americans healthier. It strengthens our economy and pushes the boundaries of what is possible in medicine. This investment includes targeted increases for research in critical areas, such as Alzheimer's, diabetes, Parkinson's, women's health, maternal health, rare diseases, and cancer. We also increase support for NIH's IDEA program. That expands the research capacity in 23 states, including my home state of West Virginia, and continues to be important for institutions like West Virginia University and Marshall University. The bill strengthens our efforts to combat substance abuse, an issue that still continues to affect many families and communities across the country, and my state most deeply. So we are supporting prevention, treatment, research, and recovery programs. If you look at the latest statistics, we're actually bringing the statistics down, but they're still way too high. We bolster support for rural health care programs. Rural America is tough to get health care affordable and accessible in some ways, but we're trying to increase access to care for more than 60 million Americans who live in rural areas. And critically, we maintain important conservative policy riders like the Hyde and Weldon amendments, ensuring the bill reflects long-standing bipartisan consensus. The Labor HHS bill focuses on our children, from early childhood through post-secondary education, ensuring that they're prepared for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. This includes critical infrastructures to help American workers upskill and to advance their careers. And we include funding for apprenticeship grants to support the Trump administration's goal of creating 1 million active apprenticeships. The bill's important to our country, but make no mistake, it's really important to my state of West Virginia. For our universities, our hospitals, dozens of nonprofits and workforce programs, treatments for our coal miners, and those suffering from opioid addiction. All of these things help my fellow West Virginians, and I know this because I hear directly from them about it every single day. My driving force in crafting this bill is to help meet those needs for my fellow West Virginians, and I'm proud to say this bill does just that. Mr. President, as encouraging as this progress sounds, our work is not done. The American people expect Congress to fulfill its most basic responsibility, funding the government responsibly and on time. Every delay undermines confidence in our institution and forces our agencies into wasteful, short-term planning cycles. Completing this work is not about a partisan victory. It's about good government. It's about keeping our commitments. It's about demonstrating that Congress can function and can work together to deliver real results. That is why we must come together to pass this package. And it ensures that the priorities that we've carefully crafted, debated, and agreed to on a bipartisan and bicameral manner can actually be carried out. So once again, I want to thank Chair Collins for her leadership throughout this process. I encourage all my colleagues to vote positively on the entire package. We saw earlier it didn't pass, but we still have negotiations moving so we can responsibly fund the government. This is what the American people sent us here to do. With that, I thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Senator from Kansas.